Good morning. I appreciate everyone coming this morning, and for those of you who thought you were getting Michael, he'll be here next week, so sorry. You're going to do with the B team today. But this lesson I'm going to bring you today was something I prepared back in January, and I was ill. I was coming off of the COVID slowdown, and we've continued to see that trend of things going down, and then my line of work, it's been the forefront of all of our minds for some degree, but it's in my face every day in different form or fashions and what I do. But when I was looking at that and I was thinking about it, I was talking about time and where we are at and what we are doing. I went back, and this was a lesson I had given many years ago, and I'm going to tell you what I'm telling you today is nothing like what I was going to tell you in January. So just buckle up and we'll see where this all ends up. But with it, when we think about where we are, and we think about all the things that have happened over the last 2 years, the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the last 50 years, isn't there days where we just feel like this? Some of you may not. I know Roy, this is what his office always looks like. That's what Emma always told me. But you've got all these overwhelming things that are just hovering over you. And those can be family things. They can be friends. They can be work. They can be school. They can be a social media post that's hanging over you, or things that you feel like you need to respond to. It could be politics. You can have commitments that you're trying to make sure that you feel like fulfilling, or maybe you don't feel like you are, and doing the things that you should be doing. There's the fears and anxieties that seem to have gone up times 10 in the last several years. And the small things seem like big things, and the big things seem insurmountable. We have to worry about the economy. We now worry about our gas and how much we got enough money to make it to the next month. We have to worry about war and rumors of wars, even more so today. We've had to deal with death. We've lost many, and we've lost through COVID and through all the normal day-to-day cycles of life, and illnesses as well. And all these things can just pile on, and they don't ever really go away. They just keep stacking up. And are you feeling swamped by life? Because when I wrote this, I was feeling pretty swamped. I didn't feel like I was doing anything really well. Felt like my work product was, I wasn't fired, so I guess I'm good. My family life was okay, but not great. My spiritual life was really, really in a bad place. It was in a bad place. I think I had unplugged myself too many times in too many places, and the weight of that just left me feeling swamped. And so when I went to this lesson and I was looking at it, I just finally recognized when I was doing another study that we're in good company about feeling swamped. This depicting Christ asleep on the boat, and those men who were looking at the creator of the universe in total and absolute terror. And if we go to Luke 8:23, it says, "Now in one of those days, Jesus and his disciples got into a boat, and he said to them, 'Let's go over to the other side of the lake.' So they launched out. But as they were sailing along, he fell asleep, and a fierce gale of wind descended on the lake, and they began to be swamped and to be in danger. They came to Jesus and woke him up and said, 'Master, Master, we are perishing.' And he got up and rebuked the wind and the surging waves, and they stopped, and it became calm. And he said to them, 'Where is your faith?' They were fearful and amazed, saying to one another, 'Who then is this, that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?'" We're not alone in feeling swamped. There were men that walked alongside the creator of the universe, had seen things that we have never witnessed. We've just read about them. And yet they were swamped by life. So don't beat yourself up if you feel swamped. It's natural. It's our condition as we live in this fallen world that you're going to feel that. And I'm hoping we'll take some time today in looking at this And, when I first gave this lesson, and as Mike, where I developed this lesson, Mike pointed out, there was about 45 other slides that were on the tail end of this that all got truncated off. Because I can tell you, when I first approached this, and even how I've looked at a lot, when I looked at redeeming the time, I'm kind of a productivity geek. I like to find ways. I like to find hacks. I like to find ways to get more stuff done. I like to get things, and then I get way too much on my list, and I get overwhelmed, and I get depressed, and then I crawl up into a ball, and then I don't use the app for about 6 months because I can't stand to look at it anymore, and then you reset again. But anyway, heads up, so the answer is not that, I can tell you. I'm not going to give you an app. I'm not going to give you a hack. I could tell you a lot about those if you want to talk about those afterwards. I've got all sorts of lists of different things that can help you with those things. But really, when we're looking at this, I want to go back to Ephesians 5 and 15 and look at this verse, which is just a snippet out of a much larger discussion in Ephesians. And hopefully we can take a moment and try to drill down a little bit to what this is saying. But I want to recognize the context of what Ephesians and what Paul was saying to the Ephesians. In the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, Paul's discussing these deep theological truths, these fundamentals that were going on, and emphasized how we needed God in order to overcome this separation we had with him. And so he's building that case. And then in chapter 4, he talks about things that we talk about a lot right now. He talked about unity and diversity. And he talked about the fact that those two things coexisted together, which is antithetical to what we talk about. You can't have diversity and unity, or feel like it's difficult to have. But how he encouraged that our faith as Jews and Gentiles, even though we have a diversity, we can be unified under the faith in Jesus Christ. And then, just before this section that we're going to be covering, in chapter 5, verses 1 through 14, he asks us to be imitators of Christ and to walk in light and love. And then we go on to the rest of chapter 5 through chapter 6 through 9. There's a section which we're becoming walking in wisdom, where we relate with one another with forgiveness and respect. And so this is the beginning of that section. And the final thing, just to understand the context, after we've talked about all that, then at the end of chapter 6, he talks about Satan. He talks about the war that we're in and how do we stand firm against it. So Ephesians in itself is a great, and I've always loved it. I always appreciate it because it feels like every time I open it, I find something new, I find something different. But it is an outline of how we can live our Christian life and how we can do the fundamentals of getting through day to day. So with that, looking at chapter 5, verses 15 and 16, we're just going to break down these verses into some sections. And so when we see this, he says, "See then you walk circumspectly." Well, circumspectly, that's not a word we use very much anymore. And so when you look at it in the variety of different versions, you can see in the New King James Version it says circumspectly. In the New American Standard it says, "Therefore, be careful how you walk." The ESV says, "Look carefully then how you walk." And the New Living Translation says, "So be careful how you live." I think when we look at this and trying to understand it, it's look carefully how you're going. Be aware. And what you're going to find is I am really kind of stuck in military framework, even though I've never been in the military, but I had a lot of G.I. Joes. And so I've got deep roots in military. But it's something called situational awareness. It's just knowing the ground that you're on and what's going on and where things are. And God calls us to that. And when he says, "You see that you walk circumspectly," he's talking about this. And when I was going through this lesson, I always have to drag something in that's going on currently in my life. And I was in the midst of making some proposals and writing some things up. And it was about 14 or 15 pages. And I gave it to my mentor. And she said, "You need this to be 2." And said, "So you need to break this down." And she went down. And a tool that we use, and if you're in the medical field, you may appreciate this. If you're in the Navy, you may even appreciate this. There was a thing called S-bar communication. And basically, it's S stands for situation, B stands for background, A for assessment, and R for recommendation. And it's basically a framework of how you communicate. It's how you look at things. It's when you have a situation. It came out through the Navy on nuclear submarines. That's where it eventually first started out. And then when in healthcare was about 2002, there was a very significant medical issue that happened in a hospital in Colorado. And they went back and took this and used it to basically do a root cause analysis and figure out what was going on. But I think there's some important things that we can take from that as we look at this. It's just understanding the situation. Know what's going on. What's the statement of the problem? So when we're looking at it and we're walking around this world, do we understand what's going on? Well, we can choose to look at that in a number of different ways. We're going to talk about that. Also understanding background. How did we get here? What were the things that made this the way it is? It needs to be brief, but it needs to be to the point, but it needs to give you that context of where you are. Then you look at a situation. If we're going to be circumspect, you have to analyze it. You have to look at all that information and then make a decision. What did you find? What do you think? It's kind of that final question when you get to that point. So I've looked at the situation. I know the background. Now what do I think about it? And then finally, after we come to all that, you have recommendations. So then you take all that information and then you have an action that you're going to request or something that you recommend. What do you want to happen? So in the medical context, nursing does this a whole lot. We sit there and go through these things. So this is supposed to be, in the ideal world, in a nursing function, you go in and if you're on a shift, you're going to give all all 4 pieces of that information for every single patient that you have as you hand it to the next person. And as Christians, we have to be that for each other. If we know a situation, we have to know what's going on. Some of us have better insight on some things than others, but we have to be able to hand that off to one another. We have to be able to look. I understand and see things from my point of view, from my life experience. You have seen things and understand things. And that our combined nature and our fellowship together allows us to have this circumspect walk. Because if we're alone, then the best thing we got is what we know. Well, that may work for a bit, but eventually we're going to run into something that we don't know, or better yet, we're going to make decisions based on what we know, and that may not be the best answer. So when we're walking circumspectly, we need to be careful how we do that. Looking at some verses that kind of mirror this, I go back to Romans 12:2, which this is kind of my go-to verse. This has been something that every time I ever get pulled back on track, it seems to be this verse is what I go back to. But in Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God." The world does not have the answers. They think they do, and they're going to feed it to you all day long. We now live in our society where it can be a matter of seconds. You can get an update input. I can type in anything, and Google will give me an answer. Doesn't mean it's a good answer. Doesn't even mean it's a right answer, but it'll give you an answer. And if you're looking for it, you can find it. But we have to watch that we be transformed with the renewing of our mind, so we have to tap into the Word. That is the location and our true north for knowing what is right. And also in Ephesians 5:18, which goes on just a little further from the verses that we are focusing on, it says, "Do not be drunk with wine, which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit." So when we look at our walk, we have to understand that we are going to be filled with one or the other. But I think the analogy here is this wine and dissipation, which we know, of course, that if you take too much alcohol, that impairs your judgment. You can do things that can lead to actions. And we talked about that quite a bit just this last month. But be filled with the Spirit. But we're either filled with one or the other. It's either this world or the Spirit that He has given us. And if we live in that Spirit, we will then walk in that Spirit. So when you're talking to walk in wisdom, to be walking in wisdom, you're walking in with the Spirit. The Spirit is with you. He's guiding you. And in the end, He's giving you the S-bar of what's going on. He's giving you the information so you can understand the situation, the background, how that needs to be, what needs to be done, and when it needs to happen. And if we walk in the Spirit, we shall not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. So when we come down to doing the right thing and we talk about walking this life in wisdom, if we do this, he tells us that we are not going to succumb to the flesh. Does it guarantee us? No, because we're not perfect, because we're not going to listen to the Spirit every time. But this is our goal, and this is what we need to do, that he'll protect us. Now, with this as well, is something that I discovered several years ago. I've read quite a bit on it. Not to say that I'm an authority on it, I just know enough that I talk about Christian worldview versus secular worldview and understanding that. And as a father, it was something that I became very preoccupied with, because it's kind of, in one person's view, it's just that it's the kind of, we have a pair of glasses. And we either have biblical glasses or we have secular glasses. And you pick that up, and whatever you do is we all look at the same set of facts. The world is what it is. What you see is what's there. But depending on which set of glasses you wear, you interpret those facts differently. You assign meaning to them differently. And so, with this being in the Spirit and walking in the Spirit, it affects how we interpret. So I see situation A as a Christian, and I see this, and I come up with a solution to that. And another very intelligent, wise person in the world could look at that same situation and give you a completely different answer. I mean, and that's, to me, higher education and its danger in and of itself. Because you've got wise people influencing people that are with lack of knowledge or lack of experience, and they present them a series of facts. And if we don't give them those situations and understanding and have those glasses so they can filter that information, they're going to take something that makes sense because it's logical if you look at it through human or secular glasses. And so I think that's the thing you have to understand. You have to have these biblical glasses in place. And the mind and the spirit are intricately linked. And so when we have that spirit within us, those biblical way that we reference everything, it changes how we look at stuff. I look at things now very differently than I did 10 years ago. Is the situation any different? No. But it's now informed by my experience, my better understanding, my understanding of the deceptions of things that may have been given to me before, and how I thought I understood it. But all these things are about walking circumspectly, and we're walking in the Spirit. A spirit-filled life leads us to not succumbing to these lusts of the flesh. And like I said before, it's an either-or proposition. It's not, and the devil is going to tell us you can have a layer of series of gray. You can kind of be in the middle. And I'll be honest, I lived that way in a lot of my stuff. I kind of had some things in my life where I felt like it was very cut and dry. It was very black and white. And then other stuff, I just had, I can't really reconcile this, so I'm going to kind of live in the middle. And the problem with that is that when things get out of tilt, and when you get swamped by life, and those things get presented to you, you don't have clarity on how you should be. You don't have the clarity of how you're going to react to it. And so Satan then takes that opportunity to deviate you closer and closer to him, and you don't even know it, and you're out of bounds on something that you didn't even have any idea was going on. COVID did that to our society and to our country and to the world. It shook everything up, it made everything crazy, and then people just started acting like you would never expect to see people act. I saw actions, I saw people interacting with each other that I never expected to see what I saw. But they weren't grounded in exactly what they were going to do. I acted in ways that I didn't expect myself to do. I saw those things in myself. But Satan wants us to believe that it's all shades of gray, and that's just not how we do. We cannot walk this life in shades of gray. So when we look at this as well, in 1 John 1 and 7, but we walk in the light as he is in the light. We have fellowship with one another in the blood of Jesus Christ. So again, in this walking, if we walk in the light, and we even back up this is also referred to in the first part of Ephesians. We have fellowship, which is what we have today. This is fellowship. This is coming together. This is the here and now. This is part of walking in the light, is being here. It's not the whole game, but it's a big part of the game. And I can tell you, I know that one of my biggest issues was I was not here for a good part of those 2 years. And that affected my ability to walk circumspectly because I didn't have the reference point. I didn't have the interactions and the relationships that keep you on track. So the importance of this is that we fellowship with one another when we walk in the light. And that through this in Ecclesiastes 4 and 12, it just brought this up when I was studying. Through one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. You know, that the truth of the fact is that one of us can sometimes withstand things, but not always. Two of us, we have a better chance. But two of us with God present with us is that we pretty much can be an indomitable force against evil. And we can walk that life. And that knowing through all that, we know and have the confidence the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from all our sins by that holding that walk. And then finally, looking at this last section, we say, for you were once in darkness, but now you are in the light in the Lord, walking as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light. You know, I think when I look at this and I think about walking in the light, and I look at the references of Christ and these fruits of the Spirit, I mean, you know, I think as we have the fruits of the Spirit, that causes Satan some issues. He's not happy with that. That's positive things that can be brought out. But you know, I think what drives him even more nuts is if we expose those things that are wrong and that others then see that light. They have that understanding. Because right now, there's a lot of goodness going on in the world. There's a lot of good things in people that do not have any attachment to the morality of Christ and the doctrine that goes with him, but are doing good things. And Satan, I'm afraid, is using that to kind of cause a diversion. Because then we don't expose what is truth. So when we're walking circumspectly, we may avoid dealing with some of those truths. And we all know that there are those things, and we talked about a lot of them last month directly, and it caused responses. Because truth, when Satan sees truth and it's growing and it's actually penetrating into the hearts of those that do not necessarily have not committed themselves to him, it's all over. He's going to do everything he can. He's going to go through every arrow, spear, rock at that situation to try to make it where it's not successful. So we have to be prepared for that. And then going on to Ephesians 15 and 16, it says, not as fools, but wise. You know, some of these says not unwise. And if you look at some of the ways this has been, New King James, it kind of says it like it is. You're either a fool or you're wise. You have New American unwise, English Standard unwise, and then New Living also talks about fools. You know, fool is not a positive statement. You know, to say, if I go up to my kids and say, that was a very unwise thing to do, I don't recommend you do that anymore. But if I went up to you and said, you're a fool, I cannot believe you did that, it has a very different context. I have wanted to say that to some people, and I've chosen to say unwise instead. I think my HR director probably appreciated it. But you know, there's times when you look at things, but we have to be as wise. And the question is, what is wisdom? What is wise? What does that mean in the context of this? And it says, I think we go back to Colossians 4 and 5, which the same exact Greek words are used here, but walk in wisdom towards those who are outside, redeeming the time. And it goes on to say in verse 6, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. So I think when we're talking about wise, he's talking about how we handle ourselves with those outside of the faith. Those that we are trying to influence, those that we are trying to, because we're walking this walk, we're situationally aware, we know what we're doing, hopefully, we have a sense of what needs to happen, and when those things, when they come up, when we have to interact with the world, we've got to be ready. We've got to have it prepared. You know, I think the best thing about getting older is that eventually you see something more than once and you can actually respond to it the second time the way you probably should have responded to it the first time. And then it happens a third and fourth and fifth time, and you just kind of get where, you know, I can handle this. And you look really impressive to younger people, not because you're really that much better at it, you've just done it more. But when we look at this and understand how we look towards those who are outside, he's speaking of this in the context of redeeming that time, taking this opportunity. And we're going to break down redeeming here in just a moment more. But those who are outside, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt. And I looked at this and I thought about this more, and it's, you know, Christ is, of course, the ultimate example in all that we can do, actions, and how we can handle anybody. And, you know, in this study that we've gone through the life of Christ, the biggest contrast, and one of the things that I've realized is you look at the Samaritan woman, and you look at her condition, you look at how she looked from the outside. From Christ, I mean, he would call them, they were looked at as dogs in that society. This woman had been married multiple times. She was living in complete and utter sin. And if you were to stalk her up next to a Pharisee, who from the outside looked what? White, pure, good. Someone that you would aspire to be. You've got these two varying contrasts. And how did Christ interact with them? How did he treat the Samaritan woman? He told her the truth, but he did it with compassion, he did it with love, and he gave her hope that she was so excited that she was running and telling everybody she knew that she had seen the Messiah. And then he goes to the Pharisees, and he walks into the temple, and how does he talk to them? He's like, good job, guys, you're doing really great, except for if you just did the no. I mean, he's just taking them to the woodshed. Verbally, physically, he's throwing stuff around. I mean, he's having himself he's flipped out. As we call in our house, he's flipped. I mean, he went. There's the upstairs brain is no longer working, downstairs brain is going through everything. He's just responding to evil and what it is. So when we look at the world, we have to recognize who we're interacting with. If I have a brother and I see what he's doing and it's not something he should be doing, I'm probably going to be a little more direct, and I'm going to be a little more informative of what I think he's doing versus someone that I reach out to and I know that they are in a state of sin. They're having a difficult time. Their life is not what they want it to be. Me condemning them is going to do nothing for them. So when we're wise, and then we look at those opportunities. So when we look at redeeming the time. In Corinthians, I skipped over this. Don't let anyone deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become a fool that he may become wise. This is probably the one truth I struggled with more, and now I kind of enjoy it, that I just go and act completely countercultural to things. You know, now that I'm in a position where I actually have influence over some people, I just throw them curveballs and I just watch their heads spin every once in a while. Because I can be truthful. There was a lot of stuff that happened over the last couple of years in my professional career. There was things, we got kicked in the gut with a lot of things just in the world and the situation, but there was other things that happened. And it had deep ramifications for me, not so much, there was a personal piece, but it affected a lot of people that I worked with. And with that, I took a lot of anger. I pushed that down, and then when the time came, I had the opportunity where I could have really, and I was about to, could really have made and had taken that advantage of that to spell out some other people's shortcomings. And I was going to do it, and I was telling people I'm ready to do it. And then I finally sat down in this pew over here. I had a lesson from Jonathan, and I realized hatred was motivating my thoughts and my ideas. I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was all ethical, but it was based on a feeling that was not right. And then I sat there and I went to my team and I just basically confessed and said, you know what? What they did was wrong. What I'm about to do is just as wrong. So we're stopping this. We're just retracting. We're going to go back and we're just going to reset and do the right thing, which is what was going to happen. The outcome was still that, but we're just going to take a different tact. And I still don't know that some of them recovered from that. But I think it's just important that we have to be wise in the ways of God, not in the ways of men. So when we look at redeeming the time, once again, this redeeming the time, the idea of that is not something, I guess if you think of coupons, that's about the closest thing we ever talked about, that we go to redeem something. If you go to redeem a coupon, and there's not even coupons anymore, you've got your promo codes or whatever else you go in there. But it's the idea of taking this opportunity as well, taking an opportunity that presents itself and making the most of it. And you see this in the different translations that are here. But redeem, and I had this all figured out how to pronounce it, and it's exgazo de pials, and I butchered that. But in the Greek, that means to buy the time. It means to actually purchase the time. It means to go through. So, and when you have to purchase something, the key thing with that is it's not free. It's something you have to invest in. It's something you have to give something for. It's an exchange in that. So when it's talking about that, some have even called it a ransom. Is one way it's looked at. To rescue from loss is another way that it's used in the Greek. To make good use of an opportunity. I think in the application here, that's what I feel like makes the most sense to me. But also to work urgently, to do it with some level of intensity. This is like even what Dustin was alluding to. Time is limited here. If you've got to redeem a promo code, don't you love it when you get on the online account and you get it and it starts saying, you got 15 seconds to answer this or it's going to go away. It's like, that really makes me upset because I want to think about this for longer than 15 seconds. But there's the idea of redeeming. I got to get it done. It's an urgent thing. There's some urgency to it. So with it, but make the most of that time and looking at that. So redeeming the time, buying the opportunity. It is a metaphor that's taken from merchants and traders. So if you look at it from a business perspective, diligently observe and improve the seasons for merchandise and trade. That's the whole thing with a lot of this. There's a good time for things. Redemption codes usually happen when they want to move something, when things is an opportunity for them. So we have to take that opportunity offered and maximize it. Because how often do we plan our days so that we use all of our opportunities wisely? I don't know if I can count on one hand how many times I was fully prepared to take on my day. If a planned life can better deal with unexpected things that come up in life, that is the truth. And I can tell it for the last 2 years in which I was just living life day to day. We had stuff thrown at me. I can remember in the first 4 or 5 months of 2020, I'm sitting in a room with about 15 other people. I'm kind of middle of the road in the age group. There's some that are older than me. Seems like a lot were a lot younger than me. And they're sitting in this room, and we're trying to figure out stuff that no one had there was no plan book for it. There was no standard operating procedure. You're sitting here just trying to figure stuff out. And every other day, if you're using the TV to figure out what's going on, you're in a really bad spot. And we were doing a lot of watching TV just to see what was going on, and then wake up the next morning to another post on some website somewhere saying something, or going back to organizations that were paying thousands of dollars a month to tell us what's going on, and they just said, just do what the people on TV are saying, because that's the best and latest and greatest. But when we do that, but I think James 4:13 through 17, I'm going to read that, I don't have it prepared, but it says, in context, he's talking about to the followers, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we shall go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It's even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Well, this is an anxiety-provoking statement for those of us in the room, because we know what is good. And if we don't do it, it's sin. So when we're redeeming that time and being prepared, if we're looking at our opportunities and our situations, if we know what's right and then we fail to execute it, and believe me, I went through this yesterday, and I stopped counting how many times I didn't do what I should have done. I didn't say what I should have said. And unfortunately, some of it is because I didn't think about it at the moment, because I wasn't prepared to answer for it. And some of those things, I had seen it before. I had done it before. And some of it, I had gotten kind of convinced myself it's okay to let it slide, because it was happening so often. I just thought, I'm never going to be accepted. I'm not going to be listened to. People are going to think I'm crazy. But it is sin if we know what we're supposed to do and we don't do it. So redeeming that time and taking that opportunity is critical. Because again, we look at Colossians 4 and redeeming that time. It is taking that opportunity. It's going to those people outside this world. It is showing them the wisdom of God. It's showing them the love of God. It's showing them the truth that is God. Because even then, in John 17, Jesus spoke these words and lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son also may glorify you, as you have given him authority over all flesh, that he should give eternal life to as many as you have given him. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. I have glorified you on earth. I have finished the work which you have given me to do. We've been given work to do. We've been given work to do. Are we doing it? Are we taking the opportunities? Are we doing it? Because you don't know that there won't be an opportunity to do that again. That may be the very door that God has opened up before you to do what you need to do and redeem in that time. And so finally, because the days are evil, because we're walking this walk, we're situationally aware, we're trying to make sure we're wise and we're interacting in the world in the way he's called us to interact. He's asked us to take on those opportunities and utilize them the best we can, because the days are evil. And I think all of us can pretty much easily say, it's pretty easy for me to say the days are evil. It seems like they're more evil than I remember in my entire lifetime. Now, I'm sure if I talked to someone 50 years ago, they could have given you times when things were just as bad or seemed as bad. I can't imagine what it was like to grow up in the 30s and the 40s when you thought the world was turning upside down and you thought that the dictators of the world were taking over and all was going to be lost. You know, I tell my kids, I said, I just woke up with the idea that we were going to be nuked one day and everything was going to be over. And it said, that seemed a lot better than going through a 30-year war. But, you know, that was kind of the thing we had to deal with. But, you know, when we look at this, redeeming the time is because the days are evil, and these are evil days. What does that really mean? Well, it references back to Amos. in chapter 5 of Amos in verse 13. But just kind of giving you, now I'm going to read all of this text. But it's talking, and the Lord is talking to Israel. I mean, he's just been begging, he's pleading them. He's telling them, get yourself right. And he says, seek me and live. He's trying to save the nation. He says, seek the Lord and live. He said, you who have turned justice to wormwood and lay righteousness to the rest of the earth. They hate the ones that rebuke at the gate, and they abhor the ones who speak uprightly. Therefore, because you tread down the poor and take grain taxes from him. For now your manifold transgressions and your mighty sins, afflicting the just and taking bribes, diverting the poor from justice at the gate. Therefore the prudent kept silent at this time, for it is an evil time. Well, here we have a definition of what evil times are. When Amos is talking about this and just kind of taking briefly what it says, justice was perverted. When we said justice to wormwood, we don't have, wormwood is a putrid wood. It's terrible. It smells. It ruins water if it gets in contact with anything. It's just it's an awful negative connotation. Because nothing is more distasteful, more abominable than designedly doing wrong under the color and pretense of doing right. I mean, I don't think if anything drives me more nuts is seeing people say they're doing the right thing, and it is the absolute opposite. But it's just totally and absolutely encased in righteousness in this world's eyes. And in fact, when we look at that, let me go back here before I go on. There was a statement when I was reading through some of the commentaries and some of the other approaches to this and looking at corrupto optimum est pessima. I know I butchered that one too, and I took Latin for 2 years. Tells you how well my high school schooling was. But it says the idea is this: the best, when corrupted, becomes the worst. Or that the corruption of the best is the worst of all. So it's that idea of taking the very best of something and then you turning it and making it bad, corrupting it. It's actually the worst of all things, because you see the very best and then it absolutely becomes intolerable because now you realize it's corrupted, it's not pure, it's not what it's intended to be. In fact, it may be working exactly opposite of what its original intent was. And I think all of us, when we see that and you recognize that, that is just something that's not comforting. That's when days are evil. In Ephesians 4, if we go back just a little before there, and said, therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor. For we members of one another, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. Do not give place to the devil. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ gave you. That is the opposite of evil. I don't know, in the early days of when everything was going on and everyone was acting completely crazy and no one seemed to know what to do, I told Brother Dale this. I said to him, I can still remember that last service where things were somewhat normal. And he just came up and he said, be calm and carry on. And that became my tagline. I put that on every email I sent out. That from that moment forward, still to this day, it's against policy. No one's told me to take it down, but I've got it tagged onto my signature line, and it breaks corporate rules, so that be it. But good is the opposite of evil. And to be kind to one another, to forgive each other, that's the key to everything when days are evil. Because those days are evil and those things are going on, and that's how we're supposed to act. So then it becomes a question. So John, you've gone through all these things. And then you go through, and I just tagged this on because this is just seems so forefront in what's going on right now. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator. I have good people with good intentions that have taken this philosophy and they have woven it completely into their lives. and they're doing good. They're taking care of people. They're doing good things that we could fall back and look at from a Christian perspective. But the problem is they've exchanged a truth for a lie. They're basing this on things not on God, but on this earth and this world. This world is magnificent. This world is the true representation and the example of there is a creator. And so it's easy to be worshipped if you don't understand the concept of everything, because it's wonderful. It's greater than anything we'd ever see. You look up at the stars at night, and I was really excited with my son. We finally got to go camping. He actually got to see the stars. I was fortunate. My grandparents lived in Kansas in the middle of nowhere, and you could turn the lights out and you could see everything. I've never ever seen a sky quite like that I saw there. But there's so many things that are awe-inspiring about our creation. So I can get it. I can see how you can be that sucked in. But Satan uses that awe, and he twists it. And he turns it into this idea that we ourselves are the ultimate. We are the top of the food chain. We are the ultimate. And we now worship ourselves over him. So those are the things that are evil. So to roll this all up into one nice, neat bow. When we see that you walk circumspectly, we need to be observant. You need to look around. You need to see what you need to see. You need to be aware of what's going on. You have to have some discernment with that as well. You've got to be able to interpret it. You've got to take that situational awareness. You've got to take that background. You've got to make an assessment. And then you've got to make recommendations of what we're going to do. But you have to be light-seeking. We have to be constantly looking to stay in the light and not let ourselves gravitate off, because it doesn't take very much, and if you get pulled off, you just get dragged off and you don't even know where you are. Because I think the other truth is that was brought out that I thought was very appropriate is, when you get into the darkness or you start moving into that gray, you can't tell what's good. You've lost that perspective. What looks good is not good. And you think you're looking at good, and it's not. Because you're not in the light, and you're not having that exposure to know what's good and what's evil. And then we have to give light. We have to be the light that he's called us to be. And as fools and wise, we need to seek to understand. We need to understand our fellow man, where they're at, what's going on with them, so that we can better bring them to the word. We have to apply it without fear. That's hard. You have to tell truth when it's truth, even though it may not necessarily put you in the best situation with your friends, with your family, with your coworkers, with your government. You just have to do that without fear, knowing he's going to take care of this. And we have to seek to understand more and more every day and never stop. In redeeming the time, we need to look for those opportunities. We need to buy them. If you can find one and you can purchase it and I can take something, I look for them now, all these opportunities. Oh, that's really good. I'm going to use that on so-and-so. Or I'm going to allow them to tell me this story, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to package it and I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to give it to them back in a presentation that's going to be meaningful to them and hopefully will touch their heart. And we need to invest in spiritual things. We need to be reading the Word. We need to be in the Word. We need to be preoccupied with being prepared to know what's in the Word for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for our brothers and sisters in Christ. And because the days are evil, we have to know what's evil. And you have to know what's good. And that seems pretty straightforward if you say it. But we're fooled all the time. We're fooled all the time. Because Satan is constantly using that. He's constantly putting things in front of us and trying to get us to deviate from that. So we cannot be fooled. We have to recognize that. So just to sum it up, we weren't the first to be swamped by life. We won't be the last. This is going to continue on and on, well past us, until the Lord comes again. He's going to be there for us. And Solomon 1:9 and 10, he says, That which has been what it will be, that which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. There is nothing of which it may be said, see this new. It's already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. I mean, there's nothing new. History is a retread of itself over and over again. And Satan wants us to forget it. So we can come at it and we'll come up with a newfangled way. We're smarter. Got more technology. We've got better understanding. I mean, I can remember, my wife and I talk about this a lot, when we knew everything. When we were about 24, 25, had it all worked out, had all the plans set, everything was good. Then it wasn't. And I was like, well, I'm not living right. Because that's what I was at. If I lived right and did everything I was supposed to do, it's all going to be fine. But then it wasn't. Bad things happened. So it's the key. We have to look at that. So with that, and think about that we are always, and that's why we have to have fellowship with one another. David Earl's a lot older than me. A lot older. And so he knows a lot more because he's been around a lot longer. So I tend to listen to him only because of that. I mean, anything else I wouldn't, but he's older than me, so I respect him. No, but seriously, us being together, us spending time together, us leaning on each other, us investing in each other's time, that's the key things we need to do. And if I leave you with one thing, because I know you have to leave at the end with something, and I read this the other day, and it's called the first 15. So this is very much contemporary using of the way things are and simplifying things. But I think it speaks a lot of truth to it. So if we're looking at the first 15, we have to put on our armor. If we look at the end of Ephesians 6, it talks about the armor of God, and I think it was intentional that that's the way this was closed, because he's basically laying out a framework of how we live our lives, how we walk the walk, how we do the things. But in the end, if we don't have our armor on, the attacks are going to come, because if we're doing all the things in the aforementioned chapters, Satan is coming after you. He's going to come after you with everything he's got, because you are walking in the light, you're walking in wisdom, and you're doing the things that God has asked you to do. So in those first 15, looking at that, some call it the quiet hour, the still hour, the quiet time. I just recently read, Rusty Springer had a little talk with my son-in-law, talked about this book that I just purchased, and it calls it The Morning Watch. But the key thing is, if you're going to be successful, you have to start with him, Jesus, and the Lord up front. The moment your eyes open, you need to be praying. You need to be focused. You need to be looking at these. So in that first 15, because this is where I'm at sometimes, if I'm lucky if I get 15 minutes, because someone's blowing up my phone, something else is going on. I've forgotten 6 things that are due at 8 o'clock that morning. It's take 15 minutes to worship. Just praise God. Doesn't have to be anything. Just go into your quiet place. Just sit there and worship God. He's done so much for us. It's some days it may be more of a struggle theirs, but take that 5 minutes. Get an app. There's apps for this stuff. I'm serious on that. I'm not joking about that. There's good apps that can help you with that. Take 5 minutes and just read the Word. Apps for that too. Give you some things. But give you a focus on that, even if you're not in a place where you can have the time to prepare for it. And then take 5 minutes of prayer and just pray that you're going to make it through the day, that you're going to walk circumspectly, that you're going to be wise, that you're going to take those opportunities and you're going to use them because you're going to redeem that time. And you're going to recognize evil when you see it, and you're going to act against it. Because as Dale said the other day, which I was really, really, really nervous after he brought this up at the Lord's table, when I said I just sometimes wake up, because I'm pretty much angry more than I'm anything lately. I'm just mad. I'm mad about COVID. I'm mad about the financial situation of my hospital and what it's brought us to and all the decisions we're having to make. But I'm just at the point I'm mad at Satan. I'm just ready. What am I going to do to mess him up today? What are you going to do just to take him down a notch? Can't do it myself, but what are the things we can do and take that first 15? Well, we didn't talk about fundamentals today as far as the gospel and the doctrine of Christ and the gospel of Christ. But today I hope you can take this, you can take a moment. I hope it was beneficial to you. I know it was beneficial to me. And then go into your week and try to do that first 15 in some form or fashion. Do first 30, do first hour. If you got 2 hours, do 2 hours, man. Just get after it. But just make sure we put him first. If we do that, the success we have, because I can tell you every day that I do that, it's a fundamentally different day than the days I don't. And then I forget because I don't do it for a day or 2 days or 3 days and 4 days. And by that time, I'm so far out, I don't even know where I'm at. And I'm sure all of you have been that way too at some point in time. And if you see somebody out and about, you see them that may be struggling, bring them in, remind them, help them. Help us help each other. So if you have any needs today, if you want to put Christ on in baptism this morning, if you have a need of the church and want prayers of the church, we ask that you stand now and we sing the song that's been chosen.